Welcome, everyone. My name is Regina. I will be your host today, and we've got Matt Mochary on the line. He's having some internet difficulties, and so he's calling in, but he's here. And I am really excited for us to dive in the final class of this Mochary Method public class series that we've been testing out. Today's topics are going to be around creating mission, vision, and values. We'll also get into OKRs and AORs, which are areas of responsibility. And I also just wanted to call your attention to this one additional link that I've posted here. If you came into this doc earlier in the week, this link was not here, and we added this in yesterday. But in a nutshell, Matt thought it would be super helpful and useful if everybody had a mission, vision, values doc that they could look at. So we posted our own, and it's there. So if you want to click on it and take a look, you can certainly do that. So there's that. And then I'm just going to go over the format of today's class. We're going to go ahead and go through as many questions as we can first. And then what we'll do is Matt will choose some of your mission, vision, and values docs that you guys have submitted. And then if we have time, I think we'll have time, right, Matt, to get to setting up OKRs?
Hopefully, yeah.
Hopefully, yes. We're going to try to get as much stuff in there in an hour and 20 minutes as possible. And the last part is feedback on how we can make these classes better. This is the final class that we're doing publicly in this series, but your feedback is tremendously valuable in that if we continue to run these classes in the future, we'll definitely be taking that into account. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into questions. Does it sound good, Matt?
Sounds great.
Awesome. So I'm actually going to start by having Joel, who's already here as a panelist, ask his question. So Joel, you can talk a little bit about, give like a 30-second bio about who you are, and then ask your questions here, because it's best if we hear you read your question out loud as well as reading.
Amazing. Nice to meet everyone. My name's Joel, obviously. I'm the co-founder and CPO of Largo. I probably won't go too much into that, but the important things about me are that I am a huge, passionate kind of fan of learning and education in general, which is what my company does. And I'm also a huge fanboy of the great CEO within. So very happy to be here and taking part in today. Also, I do apologize that I probably sound a little bit worse for wear because it is 3 a.m. my time, but having some of these questions answered are definitely worth getting up. So I guess to run through my MVV questions, I have a lot of questions as well, so feel free to skip over any Regina that we don't want to run through. For MVV, I think kind of like the mission, vision, values can be super valuable. I found them incredibly valuable for us. They've been really good kind of guides to help us keep going straight. However, I don't think it's been a really easy process to get to. The document makes it sound very simple, but it was very uncomfortable to come up with them. The wording, nuance, and meaning behind it all was a huge challenge. I think you've given a really good position on how to think about it and how to start it. But I just want to see if you recommended any kind of like deeper reading or instruction for going through the process, because it was easy for me to write this document today or yesterday whenever I wrote this, but when I first did it, it was like a much longer process to run through.
Yeah, it's a great question. And so I don't have specific materials, Joel. Well, let me rephrase your question to see if I got it right. And so I think, Joel, what you're saying is, Matt, your doc makes it sound really easy to create mission, vision, values, OKRs, AORs, but the reality is it's not. Like, you give a suggestion of how to do it, but once I started creating these in the real world, I had lots of questions, which your doc didn't answer. And it took me a hell of a long time to get to the right place, or the place where we are now may not even still be done. And so there's just a lot of distance between your very simplistic doc and what I had to go through in real life. And I'd like to know, are there any other guidance materials that can, help fill in the detail? Is that right?
Yeah, great rephrasing.
Okay, sounds good. So the answer is, unfortunately, I don't know. I'm sure there are tons of documents, blog posts, books, etc. Mostly blog posts, I think. I don't specifically know what they are, so I can't direct you to them, but I know how I do this process. And maybe that's the key. Maybe I should describe more how I do it, because for me, it doesn't take a long time. And of course, once you've been doing something for a while, of course, it becomes simple. To me, the key is there are very few times when you need to get everybody's buy-in about something. Like if it's, I'm making a decision about where we're going to have the holiday party, like actually that may be a bad example. Maybe you do need everybody's buy-in about that. But there are other examples of things that most decisions day to day, we don't need to get everyone's buy-in in the company. But things like, what are we doing as a company? What are we doing, over the next 10 years? What are we doing over the next 1 year? What are we doing over the next 3 months? How are we going to behave towards each other? Those kinds of things really do need buy-in from everybody. And there's only one way I know of to get buy-in, and just have everybody, before I say what I think, everybody write down on a Google Doc what they think. That's it. So I do this brainstorming written thing, and I just have everyone open up a private doc, and I ask them, please answer these 3, 4, 5 questions. Everybody writes, the entire company, whether it's 3 people or 30 people or 300 people, it doesn't matter, because it's going to take 10 minutes, no matter how many there are. And so over the course of the next 10 minutes, everybody writes. Then I ask everyone to copy and paste their writings into a shared doc, and that's it. Now I then take that, if it's 3 or 4 people, then I sort of read through their comments in real time, and I react back to them and reflect back to them. I think what you're saying is blank, and they say yes. I go, great, so that they feel even more heard. If it's 300 or 3,000 people, then obviously I can't go through those one by one and repeat them all. So then I just take them away. Now I have my core inputs from the team. And with that, I read through them. I pick what I think is best, because I'm the decision maker. I've made or whoever I've made the decision maker in DRI on this, I ask them to be the editor, pick through what they think is best, and come up with the answer. Now, that's a very quick process, but it has a tremendous amount of buy-in, because everyone felt that they participated in the actual answer. And what the actual answer is, I found, is not so important. Getting the nuance of the mission, like the wording perfect, not so important. Getting the wording perfect on the vision, not so important. Getting even the values, not so important. The more important thing is that people felt like they helped create it. And here's the even more important thing, that they know what the heck the actual results are. Because most people, if you, Joel, make the perfect mission, vision, values, OKRs, AORs, and then share it with your team, most people won't read it. And certainly most people won't remember it, because they feel like, I didn't make this. This has nothing to do with me. Joel made this, and Joel's kind of forcing this upon me. So I find the participation is more important than getting it perfect. And then redoing it. I redo them once a year, because they get stale and people forget. And new people who join the company don't really have an attachment, because new people who join the company, they didn't do this brainstorming, so they didn't participate, so they don't feel buy-in. So I like to redo them once a year. So I don't know if that helps, but I truly don't care what the final words are. That's not important to me.
Yeah, that's definitely helpful. I guess where I've gone wrong a few times in my attempts previously is that I've definitely done it kind of separate to the rest of the team. So it's funny, because when I do OKRs, I would never do that. That would be crazy. But I don't know why I feel like the MVV shouldn't have that same kind of buy-in. So I also love that process that you just run through. I've been trying that a little bit and love the outcome of that. So I will definitely try and do that. I also love seeing the fact that you redo it once a year kind of gives me permission to know that the wording doesn't have to be perfect, because it is getting redone once a year as well. It kind of gives me that little okay to that buy-in is more important, and we will iterate over time to get better and better.
Awesome. Love it.
Perfect.
Right on. Well, let's keep going, and let's actually look at your mission, vision, values doc, and let's take a look at, let's workshop it together if you're okay with that.
Yeah, of course. I'm more than happy to share.
Excellent. So it's opened up here and I've got a chance to go through it. So let me go through and give you my feedback on each of these. And if you're open to sort of real time, seeing if we can make it even more punchy. And so on the first one, Vigo transforms lives through better learning. So what I want to know here in the mission is, who are we helping and how are we helping them? So in this case, you say transforms lives. So I want to know whose lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, these are good questions. And I really was struggling to get this in I guess, a digestible format. What I was going for is that when I went to Airbnb a couple of years ago, everyone I ran into had like drunk this tonic where they kept saying that like, oh, at Airbnb, we help people belong. And I was just like, what? And they will all adamantly believe that we are making the world a better place because we help people belong.
Yeah.
And I loved that. And I was just like, wow, like you guys are all pretty insane. This is great. I want people to feel like that. So I was trying to get to that level, but to answer your question in more detail, this is for.
But let's be clear. What Airbnb is saying is we help all people feel a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
So that's if that's what you're saying here, we help all people have better learning, or we have all people will deal with what we do second. But if that's what you're saying, great. Airbnb is saying that. They're saying all people. Are you saying the same thing?
If I look at the company in 10 years, which is how I answered this doc, then yes.
Perfect. Then great. Then I would say, okay, perfect. Then you leave it as is. Now the second one, what you do for them.
Yeah. Okay.
What is it that you do? And you say better learning. Unfortunately, that's so vague.
Yeah.
I have no idea what that is.
I guess that I even wrote a little bit lower in this document, but I failed to. I don't know how to capture this, so I apologize for this terrible articulation of what I'm trying to say. As the world gets better and better at online learning, whether that's higher education institutions or Coursera or Udemy or any of these places, they just get really good at digital content delivery. But I believe, and there's a lot of research to back this up, that digital content delivery is not the learning experience. I also then believe that education has the ability to transform people's lives and gives them more opportunity to become who they're meant to be. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that we do the rest of the education journey that's not captured by these institutions. We do the people connection. That's where we specialize. That's where we're better than anyone else. So we also, I guess, see ourselves as having a mission to educate the world about that as well, that people and connection is actually what makes education and learning special. So by better learning, I mean learning that has people and connection at the center of it to complement the content that's being delivered by these other kind of providers.
Perfect. And so really what you do is you help people, you give people a sense of community so that they can, right. So really what you do is you help people feel like they belong.
Maybe I just take the Airbnb wording. My thoughts on that is that there were other ways that I could say this, which are we help people belong, or we help people find a sense of community. But all of those to me were just as vague as what I've written.
Got it. Yeah, but there is a part, I understand what community means. Mm-hmm. And so at some point, that's really what you're doing. I'd love to see that. I won't press on it further here.
Yeah,
but it's
it's a good point though. I like that.
Right on. All right. So again, wording doesn't matter so much. And so the more important thing, as we talked about before, is participation. So again, I'm not going to harp on the wording, just shared my thoughts. Let's go on to vision. This one, I may harp a little bit more. It's more about just understanding what it is that you said. So so on vision, you talk about what industry do we dominate? Okay, the learning industry. And so does that mean that you are supplying, you're a service provider to Coursera, Udemy, and Stanford?
I think so. This is a bit that I'm actually trying to work out right now, is that there's two ways that this could go that I'm trying to break assumptions on at the moment. One is that Coursera could pay us and Stanford could pay us. The other is that we have direct consumers paying us as well, and that we just sit alongside Coursera or Udemy or universities to give that community.
Perfect. Okay, so you're looking 10 years down the line, we're competing directly with Coursera, Udemy, and Stanford, and we're dominating.
Again, like what I know clearly is that we can work very well with them, even if that's like Coursera hosts inside us, or like once we go down that path, do we then just take the content play ourselves? I'm unsure of that.
Yes, but here's the key. You've described your customer, now maybe you have multiple customers, but your main customer as being Udemy.
Yeah, exactly. And that is because that, I guess, there is one world that I can see it working where Udemy is paying us and Stanford is paying us and Coursera is paying us. And I understand that clearly. I guess more so what I'm trying to get across is when I'm looking 10 years out, I am still trying to work out whether that is the best way to go about it or a consumer play is the best way to go about it.
Okay. And by the way, you're not locking yourself in. Anything you say we're doing 10 years from now, again, you're going to redo it once a year anyway. And
if we go to my OKR questions, it's definitely not a lock-in.
Right, exactly. All right, so either you're learning generally or you're learning infrastructure, I would say. But let's leave that, again, let's not harp on that now. You're leaving that open to potentially be competitive with Udemy. But for now, you know you're going to also serve Udemy. So you're Regina Faltwell, fantastic, that's great. Now, what pain is Regina feeling? So when you get to the problem, that makes complete sense. Don't have a way to create real human connection for learners. That's the core. She doesn't know how to make people feel like they're part of a community. Now, I question that. Like, obviously, online versions have a difficult challenge with this. Stanford probably doesn't have this problem at all.
Potentially, I guess when you look at like higher education institutions, the dropout rate in the US is still around 50%. And a lot of that can fall down to the lack of not having that right champion in place, whether it is the community of mentors or friends or like social academic counselors, anyone they need. So I still think that there is a huge, I know that this is still an issue for higher education institutions. They are just an easier target for us right now because they actually also understand this pain point and the retention because the university students are paying much higher. So I just spoke in circles. Stanford is definitely feeling this.
That was great. Okay, so you're saying it's both online and in person have a difficulty creating human connection for their community. Okay, great. What specifically, what kinds of problems? Like online, great, I get it. Well, actually, no, let's just say, please describe me more, like when you give examples, I really understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess when an institution does have the right support network, they're generally near impossible to access because it means that you need to know, and this information is very hard to know on a university campus, where to go and look for help, which a lot of the time is like a physical door you need to go and knock on. And it needs to be at the right time when the wind is blowing the right direction. It's extremely hard to know when, where, how to access the support. And then when you do, there's limited options because it is so expensive to provide support to sit in a room for X amount of hours a day. So if you don't connect with that person, you almost have no other options. And then for students who can't make that exact time or that exact location, even when they are in person, it's just kind of tough luck. And universities will sometimes even tell you that. Or they don't have the right support for you as well. Every person and every human is different and going through different challenges. So they don't have the customizable support. Then another kind of issue is that on the university or learning institution provider side is that they have no way of understanding if the support they're offering is connecting with the people, if it's being used. If anything, there's zero data on it. The most data they might get is like an annual survey, which is recorded in Excel. So by offering a platform to host this, we can start to understand better who they're connecting with. Is this a good use of university funds or learning institution funds? Can we reassociate these funds somewhere else to support, I guess, services that are actually being used and students are actually getting value from?
Perfect.
And then online, it's just that amplified, because there actually is no way to track this. The only way to kind of find it again is poorly designed websites that have thousands of pages, or it doesn't exist at all. And then when a university is trying to track it, it's a combination of like Excel sheets and emails, which is a bad way to track human connection.
Excellent. Okay, so the example was support networks, and we'll stick with that example.
Yeah,
I'm sure there are other ways to create community beside a support network, but that's one. Okay, perfect.
Yep.
That's a perfect example. Great, thank you. Now I understand what we're talking about. Okay, now let's go to solution. So Regina has this problem that she has an incredibly difficult time creating community for her users. And one thing is that even if she offers groups and counselors and support networks, her users don't even know where and when and how to find them. And she has no way of knowing who actually accessed them. Is that right?
Correct.
Perfect. Now, what's your solution, obviously, is that you provide community. And how is it that you provide? You say that you have the world's largest community, the users share with one another, the value the users share with one another. Okay, so that's, again, too vague. I want to know, what is it that you do? First of all, I want to know what your solution is. Like when I heard this solution, I just didn't understand it. A demo is perfect because that's the easiest way to understand. But if you're not going to provide a demo in the words, I'd at least like to see, hear what specifically you do. What do you do, A, to create community, and B, that's it, create community for Udemy?
Yep. I guess, again, I did struggle to articulate this one. So what I wanted to try and get across here is that, A, we have a platform that can do all the connection. I can come back to that one. But B is that when a user gets value at a university where there is some of this connection, or in any learning experience like this coaching session, it's from the people you connect with. The value isn't Zoom that's hosting this, or the platform we use to do it, or the Google Docs to do it here. The real value that facilitates the connection and the value that comes from people. So the real value we have is the value that our community gives to one another. So I want to make that clear, that I think people kind of sometimes get that misconstrued, that the value of Airbnb as well is not Airbnb, the platform. It is the community that they have. That's what makes it more and more important and more valuable to people all the time. That's the same with us. The community is the real value. What our platform does is that it allows you to offer support the way you can and want and where and when, blah, 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 blah. And it allows you to access support 24/7 wherever you are in the world. It reduces all barriers to connection. And I said a little bit lower in our moat as well, is that one area that we really see as being kind of like our secret sauce is not just the fact of the size and value of our community, but we are using science to understand and facilitate great interactions. So relationships are built on interactions. You get the value out of the relationships. So we use science to make our platform almost force positive interactions. So we'll continue to kind of research down that space. Does that kind of give additional context, Matt?
Yes. So the key is somehow you are causing all interactions on your platform to be positive.
Most of them, because some people just don't. Some people shouldn't gel. So one thing is that we'll force, wherever possible, you to meet with someone who's a good match for you. And again, we'll use like matching science, like Facebook does, to get that better and better over time. And then once you have the interactions, we'll improve that more and more over time.
Good matches for each person's current needs. Okay, so basically by saying, hey, we give the right resource at the right time to the right person, therefore the interaction is positive. And that builds a positive relationship.
Yeah, great. That's an easy way to say what I just said over 10 minutes.
No, that's okay. Great. all right, I still want examples of what that is. Like, I'm feeling depressed, therefore I need a therapist. Therefore, here's a therapist available at this time. And by the way, this therapist is, specializes on depression for your age group. Therefore, we put them together with you. Therefore, you'll likely have a good interaction with them.
That is a very good example. I guess like we kind of see this breaking down into like a few major areas of support or connection. One is like social. So when you first start in any kind of learning experience, you really need to surround yourself with peers. So when you, within a certain amount of time of being in a learning experience, your chances of kind of retention and success are really dependent if you make a friend or someone who knows your name in the first couple of days. So that's one example that we were forced to happen. Force is such a wrong word as well. If people don't want the help, they don't have to take it, but we will kind of like support to happen.
Yes,
then academic. So like a tutor is another example. So when you're struggling with a piece of context or a piece of content that you're learning at the moment, there'll be someone who knows the academics that you're trying to run through that can support you. Pastoral, so counselors or advisors, well-being, any of that kind of part of your learning experience at the right time. If you do need help because you're struggling with depression, that we can connect you with a counselor. And then kind of like the what next. It's really easy in a university sense to say it would be a career advisor, but when you're in a career, the term career advisor kind of feels a little bit weird, even though it shouldn't, because everyone should consider their career all the time and what they want out of it. But like that kind of career advisor, where to go to next, how do you achieve that next level in your career? And it's a bit more holistic opposed to just the exact content. But every bit of content you learn is to help you achieve another kind of step in your life, and so how to put that into practice. So they're the examples of support. We see the way you access those support happening two different ways. One is kind of like passive, where the user has to take active steps to do that. So there'll just be all the different support available on the platform. Like, I want to go on holiday on Airbnb, you search up what you want. Because we want to work closely with Coursera, etc., we want there to be like active prompts throughout the platform to take support from being passive to active, where it'll push you into support at the right time, where it knows if you're struggling on XYZ in the course for too long, it'll pop up, hey, here's 3 or 4 people that might be able to support you in this particular action.
Got it. Okay. So let me describe this back. So we have an online platform that gives students, gives administrators the ability to offer lots of services, gives students the ability to see all the services, activities, groups, social events, counselors, classes, other students that are available, and then makes them able to sign up for these different activities or interactions. And that's the base platform. In addition to that, we make suggestions that are customized for each student at each time, saying, hey, I think, sounds like you haven't, you're struggling in this class over here. Here are 3 tutors that might be able to help you, and here is when they're available. Or sounds like you haven't gone to a social event in a long time. You've said before that you were an extrovert, enjoy being around people. Here are 3 social events that are happening in the next 3 days. Is that what you're describing?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Now then, and what's unique about this, because there will be other platforms offering this, what's unique about this is that you're getting into science somehow of creating good matches, better matches for people for what they need at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The matching is one aspect, and then the interaction as well. I guess like it does sound crazy to say you somehow have science on this, but I don't think it's that insane. It's like that's exactly what Facebook does, and the way we're going about it is that we now have one of our advisors is the chief data scientist or ex-chief data scientist of Facebook. So we want to bring other people that have done it in to help us do it. So it's the matching, then it's the actual interaction. So I actually haven't seen anyone in the world yet, I guess, research the science of interaction and how that leads to relationship and implement that into a software. But then again, I guess I really want to harp on the fact that it's the community of people is the value, because Airbnb could have the best software in the world, but without that community of people offering houses and places to stay and experiences, it is essentially worthless.
Agreed. So that's why, Joel, this part about the platform is built on science That's what you do uniquely. That's actually not the asset you control, because other people can learn this science.
Yeah.
So I'm talking about something that you can. So we're now moving on to moat. This
Mm-hmm.
is the hardest part for most people to get. And this, by the way, is the part that public company investors value the most. And therefore, late stage private equity investors also value significantly. And it's something that you actually takes a while to create. You have to be intentional about it. And so most early stage investors, all they care about is growth. They just care about get to product market fit, have customers buy it, and then show me that lots and lots and lots more customers will buy it through scaling revenue. And so all they care about is growth. Unfortunately, and you can get a company public with just massive growth. Unfortunately, you'll only get really massive value if public equity investors think, oh my gosh, nobody else can do this. So we look at Facebook, there's network externality. If you're going to join a social network, you're already going to join a social network where the vast majority of your friends and family have already joined. Why join one where there's very few people on it? So Facebook has this huge advantage now because the majority of the world is already on it.
Yeah.
That's a moat. That's something that means nope, it will be very difficult for the next competitor to try to recreate that, because they've got to buy a whole bunch of users before they can create enough value that they actually start to charge people any kind of money off of it. And so in this case, you talk about people, you talk about your community. Yes, you're talking about two things you mentioned here. Our platform has science. I think that's your unique solution. I don't think that's a moat. I think that people will be able to recreate that science. So let's put it up there. But let's go to, we've owned a user from university into adult life. Yes. If you know me and you know what I like, I'm much more likely to stick with you rather than to go to something new because you have so much history on me. However, it's much more powerful if the first mover, you being the first mover, has an advantage, not just on those individuals, but on everybody else as well. So are people more likely to join your community because you already have a big community or no?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, great. So I would just call that, and why is that?
I guess like with everything, if you see a friend do something, you're more likely to do it. But then also because the value is coming from the people you're accessing in the community, the bigger the community is, the more valuable the community is, the more likely there is the perfect person to help you.
Right.
If there's only 100 people that you can get support from, it's unlikely that you'll find the right person. When there's millions and millions, it's likely that the exact person you need to help you is there, who understands what you're going through exactly.
This is awesome. I just want to also be mindful of time so that we have time to go over the values. It's 9:33, Matt. So if we could get through values and then also move on to someone else's. That would be
Perfect. I think we just did it. I think we just wrapped up vision. Thank you very much, Joel. That was awesome. There could be other examples of moats, but I think that one is good enough.
Great.
I
love that. I appreciate that. Thank you.
You got it. You also did a really good job on values, but just that it's not just me interacting with you the whole time, Joel. Let me jump off and pick someone else for values. Understand. Okay, cool. Awesome.
Sweet. And maybe what we can do, Matt, is go through somebody else's values specifically so that they can see how you talk through values. Does that sound good?
That sounds great. Shall we do it with Sydney?
Yes, we absolutely should do it with Sydney. He is coming up right now as a panelist. Thank you so much, Joel and Ashley, for being here from Vigo. Represent.
Thanks for having us, Regina. This is super fun. Although we're somehow adding value to you, this is definitely just adding value to us.
It adds value for everybody.
Yeah, a lot of people are learning from your example, so it's excellent. Sydney, welcome to the stage.
Thank you so much. This is awesome. Can't believe this is the last one.
For now. There may be more in the future. Right on. Awesome, Sydney. So before, Sydney, we jump into your workshopping your values, let's actually answer that first question that you had, because it was a good one.
Cool. Yeah. Just to summarize the question, I guess. So for most of the things that you teach, I think there's always like some process or some kind of things that you can do to make sure that things happen. Whether it's like pinging people to keep in touch with relationships, putting something on your calendar to do something specific. With mission and values, it seems like it's very easy to just get into the habit of writing down your mission and values and what you aspire to, and then just ignoring it for the rest of the year. And so my question was, how do you avoid the end run problem of like their values being integrity, communication, respect, and excellence, and then obviously no one in the company actually following those? And people always say the earlier you are, the more important culture is. So how do you actually do that to enforce those values after you create them?
Yeah, really good point. And they're two very different things. Mission is one thing, values are another. So let's look at them separately. And values, as I wrote in the answer, my written answer here, but now I understand your question better. Actually, let me repeat back your question to make sure I understood it. I think what you're saying, Sydney, is that, hey, Matt, writing down mission, vision, values, or in particular mission values, seems, it's doable. I just answer the questions, write them up and post them. But does it really change anything in the company? Like we have seen famous examples of companies having values that nobody followed. And I don't want to do that. I want a way to, if we're going to take the time to create these values, have people actually follow them. How do we do that? Is that right?
Yes, 100%.
Okay. Perfect. All right. So first thing, let's start with values, because I think that's the more interesting one. Or maybe we'll start with mission because that's the quicker one. Mission is simply about, here's what we're trying to do in the world. Does that excite you or does that not excite you? So that's about, during the interview, sharing that information with people and just asking them that question. And if they're excited by it, great. And if they're not, they shouldn't join. So all of these mission, vision, and values are about who is on the team and who is not on the team. It's who you bring onto the team and who you let go once you discover that they're not excited about the mission, they don't believe in the vision, and they're not willing to abide by the values. But let's change the name of values, because I can already see that values is a bad name here. It's a misnomer. It's really behaviors. That's all it is. So we should just call them behaviors. So I'm going to change this. I'm going to go mission, vision, behaviors from now on. It doesn't sound as good. That's why everyone calls them values, but it's really what they are. And so what I do is, once I create these behaviors, I make sure that during the interview process, one, I'm in reference interviews, I'm asking former managers, does this person really believe in accepting feedback? How do they accept feedback? Do they seek it out? Are they defensive when they get it, or do they seem appreciative of it? So asking questions around the behaviors that they've exhibited in the past. And for me, by the way, recruiting is all about reference interviews. I think the interview in the moment can be completely workshopped by a candidate. I've seen people who interview fantastically in person, but then perform zero in real life. And I've seen the exact opposite of people who are terrible in the interview, but then are phenomenal producers. So to me, in the recruiting process, I focus on the reference interviews, because that really is much more indicative of how people behave. And so, but then I list, here are the behaviors that you will need to do if you're going to succeed in our company. And I share those behaviors and I try to scare people, like, are you really up for having anybody and everybody give you feedback at any time, and you having to turn around and say, thank you, I really appreciate you being willing to share that with me? I mean, that's a brutal thing. And by the way, we share this feedback in public. So it's not like we go back behind closed doors and share it with you one-on-one. If someone says, hey, Sydney, I think I just want to let you know, I want to offer you feedback. Are you open to it? And you say yes. They'll say, Sydney, I think, the way you wrote up your values, like, I didn't understand what the hell they were. And I recommend you put examples of behavior, like real people, real examples of people doing things, so I understand what behavior you're talking about in your values. Like, are you really up for hearing that in a public forum? That kind of thing. And so if people really do, I try to scare people away during the recruiting process. And then much more importantly, once people are at the company, if I see behaviors that I think, wow, that's awesome that person did that. That's exactly the type of behavior I'm looking for. I will call that out in public instantly. And then on the other hand, if I see behaviors or anybody sees behaviors that don't match, I ask everyone to sort of raise their hand and say, hey, that doesn't work. And then if we'll share with that person why that behavior doesn't work, we'll go back to the values list. Here are the behaviors we're looking for. And if the behavior continues, then we let them go. Because the reality is that no matter how, this is a sort of a big question, like, well, what about someone who's just kicking ass? I mean, they're just such a great producer, your top salesperson, your top engineer, your top whatever, but they continually do things like they're continually disrespectful to other people. They're continually get defensive around feedback and don't seem like they don't want to learn. They continually, whatever goes against your behavior. Most people will say, let it slide. That person produces so much, we'll let them get away with it. Unfortunately, I don't think that's the right answer. I think what then happens is that person then becomes almost like a poster of what behaviors you can get away with. And then everyone else starts to copy those bad behaviors. And so a highly productive jerk in my organization gets let go, just as an unproductive sweetheart also gets let go. It's only people who perform well and behave well. Does that answer the question, Sydney?
Oh yeah, beyond the question. And in fact, it like answered other questions that were in my mind that weren't even on the document that were related to that. And I think like the clearest part of all of this is to me is like, it's so easy to push the culture conversation and everything later, because it's like you have so many things on your mind, so you always just indefinitely push it out. But making it into like actionable steps of like, hey, call out the good behaviors, use it as a filter in your interview, really put pressure on people and like use it as a lighthouse for whether or not people want to work for you or not. Like that seems like, actionable steps that are very easy to just start doing immediately, that don't pull you away from like all the other stuff you're thinking about.
Fantastic. Excellent. So if you're open to it, let's jump into your values and see if we can workshop them. Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. And I'm going to skip over mission, although similarly to Joel's, I would want to know, who are you doing this for?
Right.
But let's jump into values. I really liked your values when I read them. What I really liked about these is they're unique. That I don't feel like this is something that you copied and pasted from somewhere else I saw. This feels like you or someone on your team wrote these from scratch originally. Is that true?
Yes. Well, it was inspired by other places, but they were originally written.
Yes. Inspiration is totally fine. Yes. There's no truly new behaviors in the world, but just new ways of describing them. So that's important. It's important to me that these weren't just copy and paste. And as I say that now, I realize that one of our values is a copy and paste, and I'm therefore going to go back and we're going to change it so they're all original. And then, so the only thing that I felt missing here was real live examples.
Yeah.
Because that makes it tangible. So would you be willing to share with me like a let's try it? Who can you think of one person on your team? If your team is big enough, you'd want to pick a person outside of your leadership team. If your team is not big enough, then of course you have to pick it inside your leadership or your current team. You don't want this to be you though. Yes. And the reason is because of course you are highly motivated to behave like a superhuman because you own, a huge portion of the company. But that's not a fair expectation of those that don't own a huge portion of the company. So, and you also want to be describing reality in your company, not, some fanciful, idealized version that doesn't exist at all. And so what's an example of someone other than you who has this let's try it mentality? What's the first name of the person, and what did they do?
So the first name is Eliza, and this actually happened this week in our one-on-one, where she created this really great like revamp of our new onboarding emails. And then I looked at it and I was like, hey, here's a gazillion pieces of feedback on this email. And she basically was like, hey, we should just launch this and see what happens. Like, what's the real risk in trying this out without like all these pages and pages of feedback that you had for this email? And I was like, you're totally right. We shouldn't be sitting here like contemplating this email in a vacuum and writing just this stuff in the document. We should totally just try it and see what it does. And if it is a step in the right direction, then we know. And if it isn't, then we also know. And we should just try it.
Perfect. Great. Love it. Excellent. And can you see, Sydney, why having that example would make it more tangible and real for other people?
Yep. And actually in your public example that you shared, that was the one thing I immediately pulled out from it and put into my notes is like, oh, I should totally add real life examples because they are so much more impactful when they're there.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Excellent. Well, then that's the only change that I would recommend to this is keep adding examples for each one. And then I think you've nailed it.
Cool. Amazing. Thank you so much. This is awesome.
Right on. Let's, we're going to go into, I think, OKRs now. Sydney has really good questions also on OKRs. Regina, do you want me to answer one question, Sydney's one OKR question, and then go on to others? Or do you want me to move on to Aparna for OKRs?
Totally good to go through Sydney's question just because it was so good. And I think everybody else here would find it beneficial.
Okay, great. So Sydney, while we have you up on stage, can you please ask your question about OKRs?
Yeah. So I've heard a lot about OKRs, some teams that use it, some teams that don't. And the common thread I hear often is it's not good for pre-product market fit or like super small teams. And it's good for like, because it adds like this operational overhead and it sets this direction where like early on you want to be super malleable. And my question is this true? And if it is true, then like at what size does it make sense to start setting up OKRs?
Yeah. This is such a great question. Everything we're doing today adds operational overhead. Mission, vision, values adds a little bit of operational overhead, not much, because you just need to take the time to write them. And so you do the group brainstorming, maybe 15 minutes, and then someone walks away and creates it and comes back. And so that's not much overhead. But OKRs is a tremendous amount of overhead because then you're constantly checking against them. And every time you're checking against them, you are forcing people to alter their behavior to follow the key result that you set up weeks, months earlier, which means that the new situation that they're encountering, they don't have full flexibility of dealing with that situation as they would best decide. Instead, they're being told, no, you have to focus on this other key result, even though there's tons of new information and maybe the situation is completely different than it was before. And the overhead is, if you now want to deal with that new information, new situation in the way you think best, you actually have to go back and solicit the team and say, hey, I think these OKRs don't match anymore. I think I need to change them. Here's the issue. Here's my proposed solution of changing the KRs. Now you have to go through administrative overhead to get the KR changed so that you can deal with a new situation in the way that you think best. That is huge overhead. And obviously that is a big damper on creativity and adaptability. So just know that where OKRs are fantastic for is massive teams that are doing an activity that is already well-defined. So manufacturing, operations, anything that is checklist oriented. That's when OKRs are phenomenal to coordinate these huge groups of people along a very defined path. However, OKRs basically, as we said, they kind of, I'm going to maybe kill creativity is a little bit extreme, but maybe not. So if you are in an environment that's small, where the situation is constantly changing, where you don't know exactly what the right answer is yet, certainly if you're pre-product market fit, by definition, you don't know what the answer is yet because you haven't yet figured out a product that is solving your customers' problems to the point where they're loving it and recommending it to others. So at that point, I think OKRs really are more hurtful than they are helpful, because they're restricting people's abilities to just say, hey, this new thing came up. Here's what I want to do about it. Boom. So yeah, this is a great question. I wouldn't put OKRs in a pre-product market fit company. I think it'll be net negative, not positive. How does that
Thanks so
land?
much. No, this is great. And I guess one really quick follow-up on that is, if a company needs to be really creative and they are big, would you still recommend doing OKRs because they do damper creativity? Like maybe not the HR department or the security team, but like specifically the part that needs to come up with brilliant ideas.
Yes, there's a very easy answer for this, and that is Netflix. And Netflix has no OKRs specifically for this reason. They say our product is creativity, and OKRs kill creativity. Therefore, we don't have them.
Wow. Okay, that's good to know. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it.
You got it.
Awesome.
Right.
Thank you so much for coming up, Sydney. Really appreciate you being here. Actually, Matt, we're going to move on to Isidro, who I'm going to bring up on stage right now, because Aparna is not here right now. So
Great.
Isidro, if you're here, welcome up. If you can unmute yourself, that'd be great.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. Good morning and good night for people like Joel that are in a different time zone. Can you hear me fine?
Yeah, hearing you great.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for all this information, and sad that this is the last class as well. I actually, just to maybe give a little bit of context, but I joined this team about 2 months ago. So we are part of a venture capital studio, but within the team that I am on, we're focused on the alcohol division, alcohol vertical. So I joined as a chief of staff, and we actually like recently instituted OKRs across the company. So we've defined those at the company level. Right now, the team is working on cascading those across the organization. But my question is, since we work also, like we're part of the like venture studio that provides shared service platform for our teams, but and we've instituted the OKRs within our team. How can we get buy-in, since they do have some influence to deliver on these OKRs if these haven't been instituted yet across the full venture studio?
Okay, I've got more questions for you, Cedro. I don't really understand what your organization is or what it looks like. So that's what my questions are going to be on. So
Okay.
First of all, how many people in the total company?
In the total company, we're probably between 60 to 80 people.
Okay, and that's the venture studio.
Sorry, can you repeat?
That's the venture studio.
Yeah, correct.
So the venture studio has 80 people. Within that venture studio, what is your group again? And how many people?
We're the alcohol vertical. We are 15 people.
So you said the alcohol vertical?
Correct.
Okay, so 15 people in the alcohol vertical. Now you have created OKRs for the alcohol vertical, but the rest of let's go with 80 people. The rest of the 65 people don't have OKRs.
Correct.
And so what you're asking is, how do I get buy-in from the 15 people, or how do I get buy-in from the manager, our manager at the venture studio?
So more towards the latter. In terms, since like we've defined the OKRs in terms of delivering the goals that we have for our alcohol business and the ventures that we support. However, we get like we rely on services from like supply chain, marketing, finance that relies under the venture studio platform. And that's where like we're right now in that process of like, we've shared the OKRs with them. Our team is right now like cascading the OKRs, but I'm still unsure like how that will work in terms of getting their buy-in, since some of these will require their support.
Okay, it's not buy-in from the people in the 15. It's buy-in from their support services in the rest of the venture studio. There's a marketing team. There's a what other kind of team beside marketing do you need?
Supply chain.
So there's a supply chain team. So they're actually getting the alcohol made, bottled, boxed, and delivered for you. Is that right?
So both brands handle their like production, but we rely on the venture studio to help coordinate, like get transportation to get the product from the manufacturing to our distributors, or help negotiate supplies like canning and all those things to improve the costs.
Got it. Okay, so we're part of this bigger venture studio that offers us marketing and transportation if we want to take advantage of it. And
Yes.
we've developed these goals, basically, let's call them goals for now, because I think the distinction between objectives and key results is not super important when you're trying to get other people to deliver you services. And we're finding it hard to get marketing to give us the support that we need. Basically, they're not creating content for us. They're not giving us leads. They're not doing SEO for us. And from supply chain, they're not creating the transportation that we need. And we're having a hard time getting them to deliver the services that we need to succeed. Is that right?
Yes.
Got it. All right. Unfortunately, this is not a problem of getting your people to your support services to buy into your goals. This is a problem of your support services having zero accountability for whether or not they provide support services to you. So there hopefully is an apex manager. Like, you don't have authority over them. You don't have the ability to say, hey, you didn't, first of all, they're not even, hopefully you make agreements with them of what services they'll provide to you. That's the first thing. You just go to them and ask, here's what we need. Can you supply it to us? Will you supply it to us?
Yeah.
And they either say,
and they do, like, we have weekly meetings with them where we review updates on things that we need their help. But I think this will help provide more transparency on what our goals are for next year, for the first quarter of 2022, so that we can, like, when we have these weekly meetings, like, those are the things that we want to focus on.
Perfect. And the good news is you already have it written out so they can see what your goals are. Yeah. The key is to get them to make agreements as to what they will deliver. But yes, also, if they don't deliver, here's where the interesting part comes. You have two vehicles, two paths you can go down. One is you can go to what I call your apex manager, the person who has authority both over them and over you. And after you've shared with the marketing and supply chain team, hey, you guys aren't delivering what you said you would. And if marketing and supply chain go, sorry, not my problem, then you, what I call clean escalate, which means you say to them, listen, this isn't okay. I'm going to our apex manager, maybe the CEO of the venture studio, and I'm going to share with them that this is problematic. I'd like you to share your perspective with them at the same time. So let's go schedule a meeting with that person together, because I don't want to be sharing my perspective only. I want both of us to share the perspective. And then the apex manager will decide how we allocate resources. So that's path number one. In fact, Regina, if you could even drop in that clean escalate document, would be great. The second path that you can go down is to simply say, okay, you're not providing these services for me satisfactorily. I'm going to go get them somewhere else. So you literally just contract it out. You just get marketing and transportation services on your own. But the key is that what you're saying is, how do I get buy-in? How do I get people to deliver me the services I need? And unfortunately, without authority, the only thing you can do is say, here's where my business is going. Can you deliver me the support I need? And if they say yes, try to hold them accountable through this clean escalation. If they don't, and then if they say no, then go get them somewhere else. Does that answer the question, Isidro, or no?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Matt.
Okay. Now, the other question you had, I thought was also really interesting about you wrote these AORs and then, like, people just didn't complete them.
Yeah, so yeah, I work with the different functions to develop their AORs, and
yes,
completed that exercise. So the next thing was like I sent those via email to not only like our team, including like also the venture studio heads, so that they are aware of all the like responsibilities across the different functions. But yeah, I have those available in monday.com, and I don't see that a lot of people have gone in. So probably they know like what was at the end, like the outcome of their function, but not what is there for the rest of the functions. And I just don't want this to be like a checklist. Yes, we have these there, but then they get forgotten or.
Yeah. Great point. So Isidro, it sounds like you've helped everyone create their AORs in your 15-person alcohol vertical, and everyone has done so, but you see that no one is really looking at anybody else's. Is that right?
Yeah, and also the included in the AORs are the functions within the venture studio.
Oh, so you did it for all 80 people.
Yeah, but I didn't did it per person, did it by function.
Got it. So you did it for the general functions, for marketing, for supply chain at the top level, but within those, marketing, supply chain haven't completed it for their own individual people. Is that right?
It hasn't, like, I don't know if we need to do it at the individual people. The only thing is I haven't seen that people have gone in, like for example, marketing, it hasn't gone in maybe to the document, so that probably they haven't seen what is there for supply chain, for like digital, for the other like sales function. So I don't know if that is a good sign.
No, that's not a good sign. It means
Yeah.
that they looked at it, they saw it, they said, this is bullshit. We're not going to spend any time on this. Yeah. So you've assessed it correctly. They're not bought in, they're not using it, they're not looking at it. And people within your own team are also not looking at other people's AORs. So here's what AORs are useful for. They, at a certain point down the road, you will discover that there are two people who think they're responsible for the same thing, and therefore they'll fight over it. You will also discover that there are no people who think they're responsible for something else, and therefore it won't get done. The only thing that AOR is really useful for, in my opinion, is to take those conflicts and bring them forward, make them visible now instead of waiting for the miss to occur 3, 6, 9 months from now. So what I do whenever I create AORs is I then look at them myself and say, okay, where do I see conflicts? Oh, I see George thinks he's in charge of doing the code reviews and releases, but so does Susan. So who actually is the one who's in charge of that? And then I collect them both and say, I usually do this in a group. So I'll say, as a group, as a team, we're going to sit here and we're going to do that brainstorming together thing where everyone writes for 5. First, I show them my example of what an AOR list looks like, so they see what a good example is. Then I take the entire group, 15 minutes during a group meeting, and say, let's all co-write for the next 15 minutes, write in your AORs. So everybody does. Now, for the next 15 minutes after that, let's all look at each other's AORs and see if we see any conflicts or any things that are completely missing from here. And we look, and if I identify some conflicts, I say, okay, great, you two have a conflict. We're not going to take the rest of the team meeting to resolve it, but I will meet with the two of you separately to resolve who actually is the directly responsible individual over that issue. And that's it. And then later, so that's the real value. So I think you basically have gotten there, Isidro. You're just missing one meeting. And that meeting is, at this point, probably 10 minutes long. For in your next team meeting, when you have all 15 people together, take 10 minutes for everyone to look at the AORs and say, do we see any conflicts or do we see anything missing? And if the answer is no, you're done. And now everyone knows what everyone's working on. And if the answer is yes, you can solve it together with who's ever involved in that conflict, asynchronous, offline.
Perfect. This is amazing.
Awesome.
Very helpful.
Really
I'll let you know how it goes.
Right on.
Matt, really quick follow-up question on creating lots of buy-in and doing the co-write. Would you recommend this for also very large teams, or how would you go about it if the company is a pretty sizable number?
Yeah, here's the beauty of co-writing, especially if people are co-writing on their own private doc and then they copy and paste it into a group document. In 10 minutes, I can have one person write their thoughts, or 5 people write their thoughts, or 50 people write their thoughts, or 500 people write their thoughts, or 5,000 people write their thoughts. So there's no limit to how many people can be included in the creative brainstorming process during that first, let's all write together for the first 10 minutes on a private doc. Then everybody copy and paste into the public doc. Now, if it's 3 people or 5 people that wrote in, I then will take another 10 minutes and say, hey, let me repeat back each of these to make sure I understood. So make the person feel really heard. But if it's 50, or if it's 500, or it's 5,000, then I don't do that. Then I just say, thank you all for sharing. I'm going to go through all of these and I'm going to synthesize them into a final draft that I'll then share with everybody.
Great. And follow-up question to that, would you workshop that with the department or team leads for like a 5,000 person company? Because there's no way you would know every single person in that 5,000 person company.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks. Aparna actually just joined us, so I'd like to jump back up to her questions. Aparna, if you want to hop off mute, and whichever question you're most, actually, if you want to ask the question on AORs, that'd be great.
Thanks, Regina, and I'm sorry I was late. I had something else going on. Actually, do you mind if we spend time on the OKRs? I was just reading through AORs, and I think the answer is like pretty straightforward. There's a lot of information there that I could digest. So on the OKRs, Matt, my question was like, how do you rise something to the level of, decides if something rises up to the L1 level versus which is more suited at L2? And similarly, we're going through this debate around like what's a KR versus what's a L2 OKR, and like how do we move these things around? And some context, and I saw your answer that it'll be helpful to have some examples. So some context.
Actually, before you get into the examples, Aparna,
yeah.
What is your role in the company and how many people are in the company?
I'm the CEO's chief of staff, and we're about close to 500 people.
500. Okay, great.
Yeah. So the example I have is right now we're going through a massive pricing update in the organization. We're going through the pricing update with a couple of objectives in mind. One, obviously, we want to get our pricing right, not leave money on the table, etc. 2, we want to make our differentiation very clear, and there's a perceived price value gap in the market. We want to close that. And then the third thing is we're building a lot of different type of product. I won't say it's a second product, but we're building a different type of product, and we want our pricing to match that product. So the question is like, is pricing project itself an L1?
I'm sorry, on the other product, you're building many new products, or you're building one new product?
So we are not a new product, but we're expanding the existing product in different ways. So we're at least features. Yeah, correct. So we're expanding the value into at least on 2 different axes.
Okay, fantastic.
So my question, like the debate we're going through is pricing a KR under your top level objective to become this new category defining product? Or is it in service of defining that category, or is it an objective in and of itself that needs to be risen up to L1? When we look at it, the argument is, when you look at it from an effort perspective, it requires massive coordination across the organization to make sure the project is successful. But when I look at the outcome perspective, even if you completely get your pricing project absolutely right, that's not our goal. Like, we're not here to get our pricing right. We're here to define this category. We're here to build the product. So we're going through this debate right now, and I thought it'll be helpful to get this group's perspective, especially yours.
Right on. So let me repeat back the question so to see if I got it right. Yeah. You have a huge pricing challenge ahead of you, where not only do you want to make sure that you price your core product right, but you're also adding lots of value to it. And you want to make sure you get the imminent product priced right? Because in the past, you have underpriced significantly. Is that right?
Just the last part, we haven't underpriced significantly. There is a perception. We haven't done a great job of telling the market why our product is priced the way it is. So the perception is it's way too expensive.
Oh, okay, the opposite. Got it. Okay. So people have perceived our product to be expensive. We haven't made people feel the value yet and understand how it creates value for them to the extent that the pricing would be reasonable and make them want to buy it. And so the effort of getting this pricing right and getting customers to understand the value proposition is going to require massive coordination across all the different departments. So it's going to be very difficult to achieve. But in terms of value that it creates, it's not more valuable than making our product great. So even though our product roadmap process is well defined, should that be the L1 company objective, or should this very difficult task, which won't create as much value, be the L1 objective? Is that right?
Exactly. 100%.
Got it. Okay. There's no right answer here.
Yeah.
Sorry. The difficulty, this is like you're on a product roadmap and something has a lot of value and it'll be easy to do. Obviously that goes to the top of the roadmap. Something will create a little bit of value and is very difficult to do. That obviously goes in the bottom of the roadmap. So in this case, however, this is necessary. It's very difficult to, well, actually that's a terrible example because it's the exact opposite with OKRs. OKRs help you coordinate the entire company towards one objective. So there's two schools of thought here. And again, there's no right answer. Mm-hmm. One school of thought is make your company objectives encompass the entire company so that everybody feels like their work is connected up to the top. That would be a more broad product objective so that everyone within the product team feels included. However, OKRs allow you to solve difficult coordination problems. And in this case, that sounds like what it is. And just by the fact that you're asking this question makes me guess that this is going to be so difficult to solve without prioritizing that it's probably one of those unique situations where it's okay to let something that doesn't have tremendous value rise to the L1 occasion. Mm-hmm. But that's not a hard and fast answer.
Yeah. I can subscribe to the way you're defining this. I think my only challenge is when you think about 500 people and getting them excited for the year or getting them excited for an objective, revamp your pricing doesn't seem as exciting as let's go define this category. Let's go build a product to define this new category.
I completely hear you and agree with you. And just repeat it back, man, that is so uninspiring to have our company level objective be get pricing right. Oh, yeah. That's terrible. And I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why, again, most usually set objectives to be some things that are aspirational, that people can really get excited about, that involve everybody in the entire company, one for product, one for people, one for profit. And that's why you only would rise up to level 1, something like this, is if you won't be able to get it done if you don't. Mm-hmm. And the company, and it's existential to the company absolutely needs to do it because you're right. It's uninspiring. It's boring. Yeah. It's not fun.
Absolutely. And I think just to round this out, sorry if I'm monopolizing the conversation, but just to round this out, I feel like writing a KR underneath this massive objective of defining a category and writing the KRs, I know it's bad practice not having them measurable, etc. But like writing it as a project we have to completely transform our pricing. That's going to make sure we're not losing focus. Like the executive team is going to look at that KR every week, and we're going to have an update every single week because it's a massive project.
But I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand that. You're saying write the KR as a project,
Correct.
but at what level? L1 or L2?
L1. So L1 or L1O is the way I'm envisioning it is our O is define this category with new products. And the KR underneath this is transform your pricing to match that category that we're defining. It's
Perfect.
not a very measurable KR, it's a project, and there's going to be like many
I see what you're doing.
underneath it.
Yes, yes. So basically drop an O into the KR under the L1O.
Correct.
Yeah, I like that answer.
Cool. This was helpful. It was super helpful to soundboard. Thank you, ma'am.
You got it. All right.
Awesome. Matt, it is 10:15 Pacific time, which means we have 5 minutes left in class. Shall we jump into feedback for you?
I think we should. Yes, please. And hopefully everyone who's on here has seen that we really do react to this feedback. We've always gone through it and said how we've changed the class dramatically because of it. So yes, if you could please add to it. And another fun thing is one class we did had people copy and paste their feedback into a tweet. So if you're open for that, I thought that was kind of fun. Yeah, so if you could please take the next 5 minutes. And by the way, this is an example of co-writing. So everybody on the call right now can copy these questions onto a separate doc, write out your answers, and then copy and paste them back into feedback at the bottom of the page. And no matter how many people are, looks like there are about 32 people in the doc right now, like we can have all 32 in the next 5 minutes write out their feedback. And yeah, and even if there were 32,000, we could collect that all in the next 5 minutes.
That's right. So I'm going to turn on a little bit of background music while everybody comes over here to feedback to Matt. You can make a feedback to Matt. You can make a feedback to the entire class. We will read it and we promise we will respond. So if you just come here, copy this out, paste it into a separate document. And once you're done, then you can paste your entire writing here. I see that Joel and John have already written theirs. Thank you very much for doing that. And I will go ahead and play some background music. Thank you. And Matt, if you want to respond to these comments too.
Great. Great. Thank you. Oh yeah. So Joel, I think you're asking, hey, let's use breakout rooms to get some, one-on-one or small group connection going to workshop these mission, vision, values. I think that's a great idea. We will do another public class series at some point. And when we do, we're going to use breakout rooms because I think you're right. I think this is, and it's going to create relationships. I agree with you. Create a community. Thank you, Joel. You are the master of community, and we're gonna take guidance from you on that. Gotcha. And John, you choose slightly different background music. Okay. Thank you.
Wow. John, you're my favorite. Now, I don't know anymore.
Just the opposite. He's giving you super valuable information.
I'm kidding. Thank you for the feedback. Michael, you have your hand raised and I've got you up on the mic. Please unmute and ask your question. Did he leave? That's funny. I think he accidentally raised his hand and then freaked out.
Right on.
All right, John, my man, hop up on the mic.
Oh, wow. I was hoping to have an extra second. I know there's only a couple minutes left, so I'll ask quickly. You guys mentioned how like Netflix doesn't use OKRs for the rationales, creativity reasons. For people who don't want to use OKRs or for people who are moving fast and still trying to find product market fit to a little extent, what do you recommend they use?
For product market, if you're pre-product market fit, it seems to me there's only 3 actions that make sense. It's talking to potential customers to understand their pain, trying to build an MVP to solve that pain, getting that MVP in front of them as quickly as possible. So that doesn't require OKRs because it's not there's no process there. You're not going through a sale. Actually, that's not true. I guess you could define it as step one, talk to a bunch of customers, step two, build a product roadmap, but you can see that it's the product roadmap that matters. And just defining, here's what we're going to do. Here are all the things we're going to build. Here's when we're going to build them by, and here's when we're going to put it in front of customers. So that doesn't lend itself to an OKR really. So I just think, yeah, defining what you need to do to solve customer pain and then build it.
So,
but test it. That's the
Right.
the mistake that most people make, is that they try to build something too good before they put it in front of customers for feedback. Build the quickest thing you possibly can. Meaning the first thing you
Right.
build, even if it's code, if you're writing custom code, the first thing you do is just a Figma, write up, and then put that in front of customers, and then build out something that's a little bit more like a no-code prototype in Bubble, and then put that in front of customers. Only when customers are using that and you can see how their real reactions, do you then write actual custom code.
So, do you mind if I ask a follow-up question?
Sure, keep going.
So I guess I probably used the wrong words. What do you do for an organization like ours, where we're kind of in between like a big organization and a small one? So we have millions of members, and
How many team members do you have? How many employees?
30.
Okay, so you're starting, and are you remote or in person?
We're all remote, and we're one of the largest websites in the world, but it's still, we feel like we're kind of just like under there, where we're still tweaking the product market fit. We still have we still feel like we have a long ways to go. But people seem to be very apprehensive with OKRs simply because of that. They feel that, they have to do that for 3 months and the overhead of it. In cases like that, would you work more like assigning just KPIs to people and letting them do what they do? Because our team is mainly just very senior people who like a lot of freedom and like to do their thing.
Yeah, I mean, this is, and I'd also have to understand what your
Right.
website is. Is it, again, more, is it, if it's not clearly defined what the process is that people should follow? Can you tell me a little bit more about that, John? Like what it is that you're doing and
Yeah,
how much?
so we run one of the largest social networks in the world, but an alternative social network for adults. And our mission is to help make people feel comfortable with who they are sexually. So think about Facebook, but for adults. Does that?
Great. And then within that, you said you don't clearly have product market fit yet. Is that right or no?
It depends. Like that survey, I can't remember what CEO created that survey, where it depends on how many people would recommend the site. If it's over 40% or 45%, oh man, I can't remember. The product market fit survey. According to the product market fit survey, we have product market fit. We were like about 20% higher than what the baseline was.
Great.
But we still feel like we don't have product market fit because we don't have a retention of 90%. We have a weekly retention of like 40%, which is higher than dating sites, less than social networks. If that makes sense.
Got it. Okay. And what system are you using now beside OKRs? Like how do you know what people are working on, or people right now just have the ability to do whatever they think is most important?
We've tried over the years OKRs on and off. Right now we're doing OKRs, but OKRs feel like it's just becoming a project task list.
Yeah.
And then there's this confusion, like, okay, this is an OKR, is this just a task I have? And people don't want to manage those two things separately, so they just make it an OKR, and it's kind of like a little. It's a little much for some people.
Yeah, it makes sense. All right, I'm going to give you a real live example then. I think this may help. Plaid, which is a huge company, obviously, recently, last time I talked to Zach, this was about we talked about this maybe 9 months ago. and he shared that he was going off OKRs, and the reason is because what he discovered was everybody had different. The important thing were projects. What projects people were trying to get done. That's where there was this sort of cross-functional coordination required. Really, OKRs is about coordinating the entire company onto an action that requires more than one person to solve. And so if each individual, if you don't have those, then you don't really need OKRs. The second thing that OKRs do is that they also give a very defined time frame. And so they create a time when people can all plan together. So every quarter you do OKRs, therefore the whole company plans together, therefore everyone's going to make an agreement. These are our priorities. Yes, I'm going to do my part towards this OKR, even though I'm not the DRI for it. It coordinates the company. If, however, you find yourself like Plaid did, that most projects didn't last 3 months. In fact, they lasted 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. Then there's really little value in creating these 3-month OKRs. So they started to go by project. And that's where they ended up. They created project lists, but each individual project got created on its own time frame. And now they just have a huge project list, and there's a DRI for every single project. And that DRI has to report on whatever cadence they determine is the right cadence for that project. So if it's a 6-month project, they probably report every month. If it's a 3-week project, they may report more often. Does that help?
It helps a lot. It really
Okay.
does. We don't have any projects that are ever 3 to 6 months long. They're usually a week or two, some couple of year or a month long.
Perfect.
So that helps a lot.
Excellent, John.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that.
You got it.
Awesome. I want to be mindful of everyone's time. I know that we're 6 minutes over the scheduled ending time. So if you have to bounce, that's totally cool. Matt and I will go through all of this feedback. You guys have left a lot of really awesome tidbits, and I will make sure next time to clarify to Matt when he's responding to comments to do it in the doc itself rather than responding out loud. Matt, we got quite a bit of feedback saying it's hard to write and listen at the same time. So next time that's on me. I'll make sure that I clarify to respond written instead of verbally.
Okay, great.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. It has been really fun for the last couple of sessions, and I hope everybody here has a great holiday season. And until next time, take care. Be safe. Bye, everyone.